Welcome to the channel and welcome to today's run through of all the latest Manchester United news and transfer updates, keeping you right up to date with everything. I'm Jamie. Before we get into it, smash a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and let's jump straight into it. So firstly, I just wanted to give a shout out to none other than former Manchester United manager Louis van Gaal. I no longer suffer from cancer. 2 years ago, I had a few surgeries. It was all bad then, but it all worked out in the end, so I can manage it now. I have checkups every few months, and that's going well. I'm getting fitter and fitter, so well done to Louis van Gaal. The big C, cancer is a motherfucker. I've lost friends and family and loved ones and to cancer. So anybody that beats the dreaded C, congratulations and well done to Louis van Gaal as well. That's a nice, thought to start with a nice story, a bit of positivity regarding that. Regardless of what you think of his time at Manchester United, he's a human being at the end of the day. He's got a connection with the club. So just wanted to start out by saying well done to Louis van Gaal, and anyone that beats cancer, is doing a good job, because it's, it's an evil disease. But yeah, give us your thoughts on that in the comments. So let's move on to Bryan Mbeumo. So Brentford forward Bryan Mbeumo is expected to arrive at United this week before the squad goes on tour, with a breakthrough in negotiations expected in the coming days. The Cameroon international would join Matheus Cunha and youngster Diego Leon as summer recruits. Now, Mike McGrath is actually good when it comes to United. He gets briefed by the club, saying that Bryan Mbeumo is expected to arrive this week before we go on tour, with a breakthrough in negotiations expected in the coming days. Please, this is, until David Ornstein says something regarding this, or until I see him in a shirt and signing his contract and stuff, we've heard so much waffle when it comes to this. Deal done this week, medical booked this week, and still in negotiations. What's it been now? Like nearly 7 weeks negotiating with Brentford for Bryan Mbeumo. The ultimate issue, though, is or not the issue. The ultimate thing is, though, he's not back in training until tomorrow. So maybe that was always the soft deadline where they not in necessarily a rush to get this deal done because of his holiday and stuff. But we'll have to wait and see. I'm still reserving a bit of judgment, because we've been hearing these stories for the last 3 weeks. That it's come in and deal soon and close and very close and getting a little bit closer. So it's going to be one of these. But Mike McGrath's actually fairly decent, so we'll have to wait and see and hope that there is a breakthrough in the negotiations, because I think everybody is just getting very frustrated with this deal. But, it is what it is. We'll need to keep an eye on that one. Ben Jacobs, though, said a similar thing, that Manchester United continue to work on Bryan Mbeumo with the hopes they can have him for their pre-season tour of America. Parties remain in advanced talks. And then Fabrizio Romano said that Manchester United remain in active talks for Bryan Mbeumo also this weekend, hopefully to get green light by the end of next week. The player maintains his word. He wants to join Man United, not entertaining talks with other clubs. I think that was what he posted online. I think in his video he was saying a similar thing as well, where they're still in talks and the deal's still alive and all this stuff regarding it. But ultimately, I don't know what we've been talking about this amount of time. Like, I'd love to know what's actually been happening in these negotiations, because it just seems crazy that it's been going on for this amount of time. I think Romano was saying, though, that it's more to do with the add-ons and the structure of the add-ons and all this stuff. But we'll wait and see. Hopefully we can get some movement well, been saying that though for weeks, to be fair. So until we get like a bomber or, something of that nature, then I'm going to be very skeptical with the Mbeumo deals, because we've had our fingers burnt with this before. But we'll keep an eye on it and see what comes out. But give us your shouts on that in the comments. Are you hopeful that there is some kind of breakthrough? Do you think we'll get this deal finally done this week? Give us your shouts in the comments. Now, interestingly, Manchester United are actively searching for attacking reinforcements. They're close to securing a deal for Brentford's Bryan Mbeumo, but remain in the market for additional wingers. One long-term target they continue to admire is Rodrygo. Now, that came from a Spanish journalist who is actually fairly decent as well. Not like a Romano or an Ornstein or anything like that. More of a tier 2, I would suggest. Suggesting that we're close to securing Brentford's Mbeumo, but remain in the market for additional wingers, where we don't play with wingers. anymore. One long-term target they continue to admire is Rodrygo. Now, it doesn't say we're making a bid. It doesn't say we're in negotiations or in talks. I'm sure we do admire Rodrygo. I'm sure we admire, Yamal and plenty of other players across the planet that we would probably admire, but I don't think we're going to go anywhere near that sort of deal. One reason is because Coop was saying that Real Madrid want at least 100 million euros if Rodrygo was to leave. Now, I don't know. He's heavily linked with a move to Arsenal, and I don't know what the asking price is. I doubt Rodrygo would want to come when we're not in Champions League football as well. I very much doubt if we're penny pinching over the add-ons for Bryan Mbeumo, who in the comments, let me know, thinks we're going to have 100 million euros to then go and spend on Rodrygo after buying Cunha and Mbeumo when you've already got Ahmad, Mount, Xerxes, Bruno that can play in that number 10 position. I'm going to put it up there with a bullshit story, personally. But again, it doesn't say we're making a bid or any offers. It just says we admire Rodrygo. I'm sure we do admire Rodrygo, so there's probably something in that. But it doesn't mean we're going to make a move for him, in my opinion. Like, that would be, obviously it would be very ambitious of United. But do we not need to prioritise other positions if we do? And hopefully when we get Mbeumo done, striker, midfielder, hello, anybody? But yeah, give us your thoughts and feelings on that in the comments below, as I am sure you will. Now, the most realistic priority after hopefully we get Mbeumo done is the striker position, and brace yourself for this one. So Manchester United and Aston Villa have made an inquiry about Chelsea striker Nicolas Jackson, with the door open for a potential move. Chelsea are reportedly willing to let him go for around £60 million. Now, that came from a French journalist that works for L'Equipe, who actually was one of the first journalists to break the Lenny Yoro to Manchester United news last year. So he's had so it's somebody of a bit of credibility for breaking the Lenny Yoro news to United. So that is one to keep an eye on potentially. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, I would prefer a scenario, right? Because it does say Aston Villa are interested as well. So how about us move for Watkins, Villa then move for Jackson, and then Chelsea move for Garnacho, and we have this sort of threesome where we're all helping each other out from a PSR perspective, because, it's about time we played a few games with PSR, because other teams have been doing it for years and we're late to the party when it comes to that. I would prefer that as a scenario, which, according to that report, is plausible, because we know we're interested in Ollie Watkins. So we buy Watkins, Villa get the money to buy Jackson from Chelsea, and then Chelsea get the money to buy Garnacho from us, and we do this sort of weird three-way transfer, which we know Chelsea, Aston Villa, I think it was Newcastle, Forest, and a few other teams have all done this sort of shenanigans in the past as well to help out from a PSR perspective. So I would prefer that as a potential outcome, being completely truthful. Nicolas Jackson is not a striker that necessarily fills me with much confidence. I do think he's better than what he's been, than what his reputation is. He's just not a very good finisher. Like, he misses a lot of chances. But everything outside of that, like his overall game, I actually think he's a decent player. Not bad in terms of his outputs and his stats as well. For somebody progressive carries, we know we want someone that can carry the ball, take-ons, tackles, good work rate as well. Up there with assists and goals and shot creating actions and all that as well. So outside of that, it's just his finishing's really poor sometimes. But he is only 24 years old as well, so he does have potential time to grow. 37 appearances last season, 13 goals, 6 assists. Doesn't smell of prolificness to me, if that's a word. But better than Højlund, which is, it is what it is in terms of numbers and output. But yeah, I would prefer it personally to see that sort of scenario where I would rather Watkins than Jackson, and then Villa get Jackson, and then maybe Chelsea go for Garnacho. That would be, I could see that maybe potentially going through. But I would have question marks around Jackson just purely because of his finishing. I think stuff outside of that, I think he's actually a decent player. But yeah, give us your thoughts though in the comments. I will brace myself for that, because I think he is one that's his reputation's. I think his reputation's worse than actually what he is as a player. I think he's a little bit better than what he's perceived as, but his finishing leaves things to be desired, we'll say. But give us your thoughts and feelings on Jackson in the comments below. Now, this was an interesting one. So Manchester United have shown interest in Barcelona midfield Marc Casado as a potential backup target to Manuel Ugarte. Casado is under contract until 2028 with a 100 million release clause, although he prefers to remain at Barca. The club's financial struggles could push them to entertain substantial offers this summer. And that came from Mundo Deportivo, who are a decent Spanish news outlet, suggesting that Manchester United have shown interest. Casado, he actually looked as a decent option, I think, maybe for midfield. I don't think we're going to, he's got €100 million release clause. We're definitely not going anywhere near that deal. But if Barcelona, obviously we're potentially doing a deal with Marcus Rashford, could it be a case that we would buy Casado to then give Barcelona the money to get the Rashford deal over the line again? There might be something in a similar way where we were looking at potentially with Sancho, where we would take Luiz in order to facilitate a move to Juventus for Sancho. I could maybe see something like that play, but it'd have to be cheap. It wouldn't, we're not going anywhere near £100 million. Interestingly, though, I read this report originally from Court Offside, and this is where I'll need your help in the comments, right? Because the Court Offside story was saying that Arsenal and Chelsea both inquired about the possible signing of Barcelona defensive midfielder Marc Casado. Well-placed figures with ties to agents industry have provided Court Offside with information on Casado's future this summer, with Arsenal, Chelsea and Manchester United all interested in the 21-year-old. I'll go through the rest of the report in a second. But the reason I need your help is because whenever I read a story and it starts with two teams and doesn't mention Manchester United, but then further in the report it says Manchester United are also interested, I always assume clickbait, because why would you not start with Arsenal, Chelsea and Manchester United have all inquired about Barcelona? Why would you start with Arsenal and Chelsea and then further down the line in the report then throw Manchester United in there? And whenever I hear that as a report, just my personal opinion, I always think, well, that just feels like clickbait to me, because why would you not lead with Manchester United have inquired about, about the player, and then further down the line then say Arsenal, Chelsea are also interested? I think that it felt a little bit clickbaity. It did say, though, in the report that one source made an interesting point that Man United seemed open to bringing in Casado as an upgrade on the unconvincing Manuel Ugarte, but again, came from Court Offside, not from one of their most credible sources. So that's where I originally read the story. So I don't know whether Mundo Deportivo were just reporting on what was being said in that report, or vice versa. I don't know. That's where I need your help. What do you think about the news? It feels a little bit clickbaity to me personally, but I will leave it to you in the comments to let me know what you think regarding that. In terms of profile, decent midfielder. If you want somebody that can win the ball, i.e. he's in the top 91% for tackles, but is a lot better on the ball, a little bit better on the ball than Ugarte as well in terms of passes, progressive passes. So he is a similar style, I think, to Ugarte, where where he can win the ball, good tackles, but then a little bit more progressive on the ball as well. But can that translate to the Premier League if we did go for him? So many question marks as well. I'll put this on the Wonder Watch list for now, but give us your thoughts and feelings on that in the comments below, as I am sure that you will. Now, sticking with the midfield, Manchester United are in talks to sign two 16-year-old midfielders regarded as among the finest in the country. Seth Ridgian and Tyrese Nabisi, who are set to depart Manchester City, are considering offers from United. Now, that came from Laurie Whitwell. So just another, this is actually the one thing that I will give Ineos and United credit for, is the targeting of youth. Like we've had so far brought in some really, really talented young players. Chido Obi, Aiden Heaven, Sekou Kone looks a good player as well. So this is actually one where I'm all for United, and the proof is there that they are good at identifying these sort of talents and getting them in as well. So if these two midfielders do come to United, I would trust that they're good players as well. And I think that is something that we need to massively improve on, because you either get a very good player on the cheap that comes into the first team and, massively look at Aiden Heaven, for example, is it £1.5 million? He looks like a really, really quality player and one for the future as well. The one that you could have at the club for a lot of years as well, in which case, what a return on investment that could be for Aiden Heaven. But then on the flip side, if they don't turn out to quite be that good, you can flip them for a profit as well, which is PSR rules, and we're terrible at doing that. And other teams are better at doing that, and they get more money and they can spend more money than us because of that. And we need to get better at that as well. So I'm all for going for these sort of players as well, because like I said, they'll either make it into the first team, in which case you've got yourself a bargain, or if they don't and you can flip them for money, then that just means that we can progress as a team and helps us with a PSR perspective as well. But give us your thoughts and feelings on that in the comments below. Let's go through the Onana news. You might have already seen this by now, but Andre Onana has been ruled out for Manchester United's pre-season tour with a hamstring injury. Ruben Amorim is now weighing up whether to buy another goalkeeper before the Premier League season gets underway. Now, that was broken by Mike McGrath. He's connected with the club, gets briefed by the club as well, saying that Andre Onana has been ruled out for the pre-season tour with a hamstring injury. The reports are anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks. Chris Wheeler confirmed it as well, saying Andre Onana is set to miss Man United's entire pre-season with a hamstring injury suffered in the first days of training, expected to be out 4 to 6 weeks. Andre Onana is still expected to go on pre-season tour and have treatment in the US. Sam C said that Manchester United's medical team is still evaluating Andre Onana's injury. Initial treatment has shown positive results, and the current plan is for him to join the squad for the US trip. So we took the reality is Onana's been injured. It is a bit of a blow though, because that means that he's definitely not going to be sold if he's out for the rest of the transfer window. At least he's not going to be sold. I think Romano did say that in his video as well, saying that it's going to be difficult to sell Onana now. The belief was though that Onana was staying anyway, unless we got a mad offer, someone from the Saudi Pro League, for example. Then I think we would have accepted a bid. But the reality was that we're not pushing necessarily Onana out of the door, but like anyone in the squad, if we get an offer, we'll consider it. And I think that was the scenario with Onana. The belief's always been recently that we're going to go for like a backup goalkeeper, someone to compete with him as well. So, and I just think that would maybe accelerate that now, because Bayinder's not the answer to Onana being out. This is a statement. I'd rather Onana ahead of Bayinder. And that's not exactly, going to fill some of you with confidence as well. But yeah, so we'll need to wait and see what happens with the goalkeeper situation. Now, Onana was set to remain Manchester United's first choice goalkeeper for the upcoming season following a meeting last month between his representatives and the club. Thus, his injury represents a blow to the team. Bayinder is the second choice goalkeeper, but he did not impress during the matches he played last season, and therefore club officials have continued to monitor the goalkeeper market. John Victor is amongst the list of potential targets. Now, that came from The Athletic, who are very good when it comes to reporting just in general. I think they're one of the best news outlets out around with their reporting. Very, very good. Suggesting two things. One, that Onana was set to stay anyway after a meeting, was going to be the first choice goalkeeper for the upcoming season. But then secondly, saying that John Victor is among the list of potential targets as well. We'll go through the rest of that report in a second, but we'll just go for John Victor. So Goal Brazil have said that Botafogo are bracing for a potential exit of John Victor, with Manchester United showing serious interest. United are preparing to trigger his £5.9 million release clause, and I think that would be a good solution. £5.9 million. Surely we've got that money. We've just, we're going to get some money from Elanga going and Alvaro going and Oyedele going as well. So surely that gives us something to maybe spend, just under £6 million on a backup goalkeeper and then sell Bayinder. You might even be able to use the money from Bayinder to do that. So it's not exactly going to be, bank breaking to go and get someone like John Victor, which I think would be a good shout, because I think he would give Onana a serious run for his money. And if he doesn't, because you don't know how players are going to adapt to the Premier League and, and the physicality, especially in the goalkeeper, we've seen, that you need to actually be physical for that department nowadays as well, then it's still a cheap backup. And I'm cool with that as well. So John Victor could be one to pay attention to, and we know obviously from previous videos he's been heavily linked with us as well. So maybe that would accelerate that deal once we get Mbeumo done, because we're not actually working on any transfers at the moment. We're just literally, it's all about Mbeumo and exits. But I do think we're making contact with agents and teams and stuff. Another option could be Martínez. So United have been in touch with Emi Martínez, Martinez's representative since the start of the year, but before Onana's injury, Villa were yet to receive any direct contact. I think the Martínez stories, going off of previous reports, have always been that he's trying to force a move to United, but I think Martínez would be one. If we sold Onana, then maybe we would have got Martínez in as his replacement for the number one spot. I do think we would have maybe still go for a backup option as well, but I can't see us, because Villa want £40 million for him at the minute, and we're not going to go anywhere near that sort of amount unless you sell Onana, and we can't sell Onana now because he's injured. On Martínez, though, there's a huge difference in valuation from United and Villa. For Emi Martínez, a potential deal has not left the ground, but a deal is not something being worked on at the moment. So Mike McGrath dismissing the links with Martínez as well. One other option, though, for the pre-season, because obviously we need a goalkeeper for pre-season, is Vitek. So Manchester United have monitored Sané Lamens, a 23-year-old goalkeeper at Antwerp. He is a goalkeeper that we've been linked with in the past, but not so much recently. Those reports have gone really, really quiet. But while youngster Radek Vitek, 21, has impressed after a successful loan at BW Linz and could make the pre-season tour squad. Now, I would be all for that, because obviously this is going to be last minute for us, because you don't. I think United should have been looking at a goalkeeper anyway, so it is technically a mistake on their part. But, as we know, for the last 7 weeks, we've been negotiating with Mbeumo and not doing anything else, and that's frustrating to say, to remain professional. But I think we should have been looking at a goalkeeper anyway, and, but the reality is you can't plan for an injury, so maybe they were just looking for a goalkeeper, but it's going to be further down the transfer window, maybe after the tour, and, because if you're starting with Onana, it's not necessarily a rush to get a goalkeeper in, although I would have, and I'm sure some of you would have in the comments anyway. But giving Vitek a run for the pre-season games, I actually think might work out in our favour, because it could turn out that actually if he proves himself as somebody that actually could be either a good backup this season or potentially give Onana, then maybe you don't need to bring in a replacement. And so by default, we might actually be in a good position with the goalkeeper, where we've got Vitek that could get games in pre-season. If he looks good, then potentially you don't then need to buy the replacement or a backup. You use Vitek over Onana and Vitek, and then potentially someone to take over from Onana in the future. So that would be interesting to see. So hopefully that happens. Hopefully he does get some minutes in the preseason. We can see what he's all about, and then maybe United will make a decision on the goalkeeper. But we'll wait and see how it all plays out. But give us your thoughts and feelings on the goalkeeper situation in the comments. Be interesting to read those later. Now, let's run through the latest exit news. So Alejandro Garnacho has rejected opportunity to pursue move to Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia. Cristiano Ronaldo's team had initial discussions to be part of the Saudi Pro League title challenge, but 21-year-old to prioritise Europe. Manchester United have allowed him to look at moves. Again, that came from Mike McGrath. Now, that's interesting. He's saying that prioritise Europe, but as we know from previous reports, he wants to stay in the Premier League because he had a good offer apparently from Bayern Leverkusen. But whether he's just like a little bit like Gyökeres is prioritising Arsenal just on that. Oh my God, what a messy transfer situation that is for Arsenal. So maybe that dodged a little bit of a bullet there. But I digress. In a little bit of a similar way to Gyökeres, where he's prioritising Arsenal, but would still come to United if that deal doesn't go through. Maybe Garnacho's doing that, where he's like, look, I want to prioritise the Premier League, but if no Premier League clubs come in or we don't accept any bids from Premier League clubs, maybe he could then shift to maybe that deal to Leverkusen or somewhere else in Europe would be a viable option depending on his offers. So he could just be waiting to see, what teams come in for him at the moment as well. But interesting that he's rejected an offer from Saudi. That would have been, that would have been a bit of money in the bank for us, wouldn't it? That would have been, the 60 million, 70 million pounds that we were wanting. But we'll see how that plays out. Give us your thoughts on that though in the comments below. Now, Jadon Sancho, so Juventus have offered 10 million euros plus 5 million in add-ons to Manchester United for Jadon Sancho. That came from Damarcio, who I'm not entirely convinced by Damarcio recently. I'm not sure. He's come out with a little bit of mixed news, we'll say, but he's still, obviously connected and stuff, suggesting that the Juventus have offered 10 plus 5 million in add-ons for Manchester United for Jadon Sancho. Now, I don't know how what we need from a PSR perspective for Jadon Sancho. Now that's enough. And then also the other question around that would be, does that include is it lower bid because of the severance pay? Because we're then not going to have to pay Sancho the reported €5 million that were bought you the other day as well. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see what happens. But Nico, I haven't done a slide for this one. Nico, who's a good source from Italy as well, has actually said something similar recently as well, saying that potentially, Juventus are preparing a bid of 10 plus 5 for Sancho. So we'll have to wait and see how that one plays out. Marzio also said, though, that Juventus is making a strong push for Jadon Sancho, having recently re-established contact with Manchester United to negotiate a potential deal. So Martínez going again on the offer made or preparing an offer, or have offered 10 plus 5, not an official bid, but maybe they're in negotiations, because he's also saying that we are, still in contact with Juventus regarding Jadon Sancho, but we'll have to wait and see. I'd want to see a bit more credibility because Martínez has been a little bit hit and miss recently. So we'll wait and see how that develops. But like I said, was it Nico, I think? Yeah, Nico saying the similar thing as well, so maybe there could be some legs in that, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. And then finally, Marcus Rashford. So Barcelona are advancing their efforts to sign Marcus Rashford. Wages would need to be reduced by up to 40%, with a loan move remaining a desire. A mandatory purchase clause is a priority. That came from Sean Connolly, who's decent. The Sun was saying that Juventus have identified Marcus Rashford as their top target for the summer transfer window, but we'll throw that in the bin because it came from The Sun, who are not very credible. And Marca was saying that Barcelona are aware that Rashford is willing to lower his salary to join the club. Manchester United are now also willing to accept a loan, but they will only accept it with a mandatory purchase option after the loan expires. So there are more noises. Yeah, there are some more noise around Barcelona. Marcus Rashford, we know that's his preferred destination anyway. It's looking like through, the Nico Williams and maybe them not being able to get a deal done for Diaz, that maybe Barcelona are now turning their attention to Marcus Rashford. I think Romano was saying, though, that they're looking at, they're still deciding what they want to do with the situation. And then the reports are it might be a loan with an obligation to buy. If we do a loan with an obligation to buy for this year, can we please not put a penalty clause like a clause in like we had to with Sancho, where they can terminate that obligation to buy, because that's very rare. The reason we had to do it, though, is because that deal was done at the last minute of the transfer window, and Sancho and Chelsea couldn't, because normally when you do a loan with an obligation to buy, the club, like in this case Barcelona and Rashford, would have to agree on the salary and the pay at the end of that obligation to buy. And then once they get that agreement, they do the obligation, and then that they end up buying the player permanently, and the wages are already pre-agreed the year before when they do the obligation. But that wasn't the case with Sancho. Chelsea and Sancho didn't have time and couldn't agree on the salary. So the reason we had to include that termination clause was for that reason. Otherwise, the deal wouldn't have gone through, because Chelsea weren't going to do an obligation without and Sancho probably wasn't going to go to Chelsea without that, without the wages being negotiated for what it's going to be. Because like, how did Sancho know what he's going to get paid from Chelsea? They could have said, yeah, no, we're only going to offer you, we're going to give you 20 grand a week, and then you've got an obligation to buy. He's not going to accept that. And Chelsea, on the flip side, Sancho could have been asking for 500 grand a week, and Chelsea are not going to accept that as well. So hopefully we can do something where there's no obligation. Well, if there is an obligation to buy, there's no termination clause, and all of that gets ironed out, which we need to do. You just need to do it early. That you need to let the Barcelona and Rashford do that negotiating themselves, and not leave it till lastminute.com. But we'll wait and see how that plays out. But give us your thoughts and feelings on that in the comments. Give us your thoughts on all the other topics discussed in today's video. That's you all up to date with the latest news and transfer updates. Don't forget, smash a like on the video on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. See you in the next one.